Welcome to Walking the Earth. Today we are in Boudanath near the Stupa, which you can see the umbrella at the top of the Stupa in the background. And then we're at a temple ground associated with Guru Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche, who is very important within the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So, and we'll just discuss him a little bit and his relationship to what is now known as Pakistan. He originates from a place called Oddiyana, which is most scholars acknowledge to be north of Peshawar in the Swat Valley, which is now located in Pakistan, and it's not far from Chitral. And so he is very important to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition of Vajrayana, the thunderbolt vehicle, the lightning vehicle, the vehicle of indestructible mind and the path of rapid enlightenment. You'll notice in the foreground we have a votive stupa on the right, and there is a bathing tank in front of him, and then there is a giant incense burner directly in front of him. Now, Padmasambhava, he lived sometime in the 700s and 800s, and he is considered to be one of the first transmitters of Buddhism to Tibet, which came from what is now Pakistan in the Swat Valley. He has a hat similar to what you might see in, say, the Ertugrul series, worn similar to some of the Turks and the Mongols at a later point. He's sitting in a half lotus position. He's holding a begging bowl. He's got a staff that has a vajra on it, which is used in Tantric Buddhism and symbolizes the lightning bolt. Now there are a number of heads above that, and then a trident. The trident is associated with Tantric Buddhism and Tantric Shaivism. Now the Shaivite tradition was very, a lot of its development took place in the Swat Valley and in Kashmir, both of which utilize this symbol, which we typically think about with Shiva, but is widely known throughout the Tibetan Buddhist Vajrayana realm, as well as the Shaivite tradition. So he lived in the 700s and 800s, and it's said that Shankarachita, who was a Buddhist master at Nalanda University, was invited by the Tibetan royalty to come to Tibet to subdue demons and to spread Buddhism. At some point, he found that he needed to return from Nepal. He was on his way and I don't think he made it all the way to Tibet. I'll have to look more into that. But somewhere he meets Padmasambhava, and he convinces Padmasambhava to go into Tibet before him in order to subdue the demons. So as a Vajra master, he had the ability to ward off evil and defeat evil and convert evil to good. And so if you notice, he's throwing up the El Diablo. He's throwing up the devil horns in his hand. And this is, I would like to better understand, was this was this a simultaneous development in the East and the West? Does this go back to an earlier tradition? Because we normally associate this symbol with Satanism. Or does it actually come from Tibetan Buddhism and then transfer into the West through the Western Satanic tradition, probably through the Islamic sorcerers, the magicians and the magic practitioners throughout the Islamic realm? Perhaps it's a misnomer to call them Islamic sorcerers, but they would have been Islamikit. That's probably a better way of putting it. Because many people practiced magic, the white magic and black magic, throughout the Islamic realms in the 700s-800s onward, and then passed that information on into the Western occultic and magical tradition. Some of it may have come from Kashmir, from Gandhara, which had been Greek at one point. So this is something I would like to know. This would be an interesting academic study. That's called a Mudra. It is a magical hand sign. We see mudras in pictures from, say, the Byzantine era, Jesus Pantocrator, or the world emperor, he is often depicted, that you see at Hagia Sophia, he's often depicted with two fingers together. You also see the same symbol on the Baphomet symbol, on the Baphomet statues and iconography. And you see this symbol is widespread throughout Vajrayana Buddhism. I don't know that it's widespread throughout Mahayana that's non-Vajrayana. So perhaps you know more about that or have a starting point for us. But in the statue, he's covered with many, many important symbols. He's sitting on a lotus throne. The lotus symbolizes enlightenment, a beautiful enlightenment coming out of the dark muck of a realm of suffering. So I'm interested in learning more about what the trident symbolizes, because the trident is not only associated with Shiva and the Tibetan Vajrayana tradition, but also with Satan in the West, with a pitchfork. So now we've got two satanic symbols associated with Padmasambhava: the trident, and he's got the devil horns being thrown up. There may be more symbols in there as well. It looks like he's got dreadlocks, which is associated with the sadhus of many various traditions throughout the Himalayas. He traveled widely throughout the Himalayas, conquering demons and overcoming them, and converting places to ethics and purity with Buddhism. So he widely traveled throughout what is now Pakistan in the Himalayan region, as well as Kashmir, Ladakh, Himachal Pradesh, where he did a lot of practices at Rawalsar Lake. He also made his way into Nepal. So and that could mean that he went through the Kashmiri influenced section of Tibet to get to Nepal, or perhaps he went through Uttar Pradesh, or Uttarakhand, Uttarakhand, in order to get there, or maybe he made pilgrimage into the Middle Lands before going into Nepal. He's also very important in Sikkim and Bhutan, which supposedly he spent time in those regions as well. So he's a conqueror of demons and devils, of Maras, of the Shayateen. He is known for magical practices, which of course goes into a lot of gray areas, and it's problematic for, I'm very skeptical of magical practices and very wary of them. So that's troubling to me, and some of the symbolism. So I'm not writing him off or anything, but I'm saying that that's troubling to someone like me. Also, what's interesting is he's associated with the first major school of Tibetan Buddhism, Nyingmapa. Now, Nyingmapa school is an early school of Buddhism. It has monastics, but also lay practitioners. So non-monastics can attain enlightenment within that tradition, often through sacred sexual practices, which some might call sex magic. However, there may be mindful aspects and loving kindness aspects to it. It's sophisticated, and I have not looked into it in a manner to speak on it in a deeply knowledgeable manner. So he's associated with this early school. He's also associated with, he's a Teratan. He searched for the termas. So he was a treasure hunter, and he was known for finding many treasures throughout the Himalayas, including scriptures, ritual implements, etc. He also is said to have been perhaps the first person to construct a monastery in Tibet proper, in the Tibetan plateau, at Samye Monastery, which many people visit on the road between Kathmandu in Nepal and Lhasa in Tibet. So it's kind of along those ways, and you can go and visit this ancient place. I have not been into Tibet proper. At this point, I would love to go visit the whole world. So there's much more to learn and study. Also, the reason he's on Padmasambhava, Padma means lotus. So he's born out of the lotus in some of the legends, and that's interesting and important. But it's interesting that he is very much he's from Pakistan. The areas that are now part of Pakistan, this was his homeland. Many famous Buddhists came from Pakistan, and many important Buddhist practices came from Pakistan. Briefly, I wanted to say that a couple important things that are from Pakistan and spread into Tibet and into the Buddhist world included not only the Nyingmapa school of Tibetan Buddhism and the Vajrayana, but also a type of meditation called Dzogchen, which is similar. It has some connections to Zen, to Shan Buddhism apparently, and to Zazen. This is something that you can do some research on and see the connections. That would be a very interesting compare and contrast study to look at the relationship between Dzogchen and Zen. I'm sure there's some good scholarly books on this. I haven't had the opportunity to look into this, but it's fascinating. So Dzogchen, a lot of Vajrayana comes out of Pakistan, out of the Swat Valley, which nowadays the Swat Valley is associated with the Pashtun people and with the Taliban. So it's quite interesting that many powerful traditions of Buddhism originate in this area. Also, Dzogchen is associated with the Bon tradition. Bon tradition is considered to be the indigenous religion of the Tibetan Plateau, or at least one of them. It's very shamanistic. Nowadays, it's very influenced by Buddhism and does many things similarly and the opposite. So for instance, in the Bon tradition, they also practice Dzogchen meditation just like the Nyingmapa. They practice sacred sexuality. When they circumambulate mountains and stupas and sacred objects, they go the opposite direction of the Buddhists. So while the Buddhists go clockwise, they go counterclockwise, similar to the way that the Muslims go around the Kaaba and sacred objects. One more interesting thing connected to Islam, some people connect Oddiyana to Shambhala and to a hidden kingdom in the Himalayas. Also, Shambhala is associated with the end times, with the giant battle that takes place as part of the Kali Chakra tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. And Shambhala is many teachings came out of there. There's supposed to be kind of a messianic figure who's going to come out of Shambhala in the end times, and he's going to battle against the Muslims actually. So this is quite interesting for those who study Islamic eschatology. And so the thing is, most Tibetan Buddhists do not take this literally. They actually consider it to be symbolic and similar to the greater jihad, the greater struggle, the struggle against the self that incites to selfish expression, that there's a collective expression of this. And so the Shambhala expression and the end times is going to be about, basically where truth and righteousness overcome all unrighteousness. So this is something to look into and be an interesting study from an Islamic perspective and a Buddhist perspective to compare and contrast the various ways that these traditions can be read. This comes from the Swat Valley, which interestingly enough is where the Taliban have connections, and many of them are from the Swat Valley, and many of them would be connected, if we would look at the symbolism, could be seen to be the forces that the Kali Chakra initiation is talking about if we take it literally. So this would be worth looking into. And so it could actually mean something along the lines of people who at one time are engaged in selfish things and barbaric things are then converted to righteousness and overcome these things and help to liberate the world from mental and spiritual enslavement. So this is interesting. So before finalizing, there are some of the other famous Buddhists that are from what is now Pakistan include the brothers Asanga and Vasubandhu, who were associated with the Sarvastivadin and Sotrantika traditions of early Buddhism and Proto-Mahayana, and then later they both converted to the Yogacharya school of Mahayana Buddhism, which is the mind-only school, which believes that everything is basically a projection from the mind and is illusory in the sense that we have false attachments, and it's about coming into reality. It played a very important role in Tibet and the entire Mahayana world, especially in the Zen tradition, the Shan tradition of China and the Zen tradition of Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. So these are fascinating things. Pakistan, the Gandhara civilization of the Greeks and Persians, and then later of Khorasan and Bactria is very important. So these are all related to Bactria and Gandhara. So these are worth looking more into, and many people are unaware of these connections, and it's well worth exploring more and studying academically and personally in order to better learn the different aspects of human spirituality, the good, the bad, the ugly, the light and the dark, And actually, along those lines, quickly, the Bon tradition is said to have originated in Tajiks, among the Tajiks. So in Tajikistan, so Khorasan, Bactria. So many aspects of Tibetan Buddhism, if you want to better understand what Khorasan is and what Bactria was, it's very important to understand the Zoroastrian tradition and the Mithrist tradition, the Mithraic tradition, and to understand the various Sufi traditions out of Khorasan and their relationship to different Buddhist contemplative traditions, not necessarily in being part of their lineage, but in similar practices or opposing practices. This is worth looking into. So until next time, everyone be happy.